Godfrey is our guest for this hour. She is the author of 12 published books on the paranormal, strange, and eccentric. Her latest, The Michigan Dogman, Werewolves and Other Unknown Canines Across the USA, is her third in her continuing investigation of werewolf-like creatures that started in Wisconsin with her breaking news story on the Beast of Bray Road. She has authored 2 books in the Barnes & Noble Weird U.S. series, Wisconsin and Michigan, respectively, and her 13th book, Monsters of Wisconsin, is due out in June. She has appeared on many national radio and TV shows, most recently Lost Tapes, Sean Hannity's Fox News, and 2 episodes of Monster Quest, Sean's favorite.
Yes.
She and her husband live in Wisconsin, and tonight we have her to discuss her experiences and research delving into the American werewolf. And how are you tonight, Miss Godfrey?
I'm great, thanks. How are you guys?
Oh, we're fine. We're fine. We're really, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. And what got you interested in this?
Well, it was almost an accidental kind of baptism into cryptozoology. I didn't even know what the word was at the time. But I had just started working as a newspaper reporter for a weekly countywide paper in southern Wisconsin. And people around my own hometown of Elkhorn, Wisconsin, started saying that they were seeing something they could only describe as a werewolf on this lonely, not so lonely, I guess, anymore, country road just outside of Elkhorn called Bray Road. And I thought it was crazy talk. I really did. But I started hearing from people that I knew and that I knew weren't crazy, and started interviewing them. And I learned through my investigations that our county animal control officer had a manila file folder marked werewolf, for lack of a better word, because people were calling him and saying, I saw this thing. I don't know what else to call it, but if there was such a thing as a werewolf, this is what it would look like. And they were all describing something between 5 and 7 feet tall with the head of a wolf or a German shepherd with a long, pronounced muzzle, tall, pointed ears on top of its head, covered with dark, shaggy fur. And the weird thing was that it could walk or run very easily on its hind legs, sometimes chasing people or cars. And the number of witnesses was mounting. So it seemed like something that, we had to take seriously enough to write about. My thought at the time was, even if there was just some kind of weird, rabid, feral dog out there, the public had a right to know about it. But what happened was, the story just blew up and went nationwide within a couple of weeks. I was on radio stations from coast to coast, and TV stations. Inside Edition came out and did a half-hour show on it. Very nice piece, actually, one of the first ones. And then it's never stopped. And the other thing was that, a little more interesting to me, certainly, was that people started contacting me and saying, it's not just on Bray Road. I saw it too. My grandpa saw it too. I have a cousin who saw it, whatever, and they would describe it. And these letters were coming from all over the country, from New York State, Texas. I had one from the Virgin Islands. People told me they saw it in France when they were in the service, and they all described really roughly the same creature. And I realized there was a whole body of sightings that they were not Bigfoot, they were not any other known recognizable animal that I could come up with, that had been going largely unrecorded, mostly because people found that they were laughed at when they tried to tell anybody about it. They were afraid of losing their jobs. They, thought they were crazy themselves. And here I started becoming the accidental collector of these reports.
Now, when you have these reports, did it seem to be more of a physical creature, or was there elements of the supernatural to it? Did it seem to have things you couldn't explain that went on with it?
I would say the large majority of them, maybe 90%, seem like physical creatures. They don't look part human. Other than that, they seem to have more musculature across the chest, and many people who get a good look at their paws will say they look like dog paws, but they were sort of elongated. And that's kind of borne out by the tracks that we have photographs of and drawings of from witnesses. So that's, now I've I totally lost my train of thought. What was your original question again? I get caught up in describing the creature.
It happens a lot on this show. It's all right. I was just saying, have you found it to be more of a physical thing?
Paranormal or natural, yes. So the weird thing about it is that, and what unnerves people, is that it walks or runs on its hind legs, and you just don't find canines doing that on their own unless they're a trained dog, trained by humans, or they've lost a limb perhaps or something. But nothing that they're doing is anything that a normal canine couldn't do. I mean, it's not like they're glowing green or anything like that, or flying, or doing things that are out of the realm of possibility. And in fact, they can do in many, many cases, drop down to all fours and run off when they realize they're being observed, or vice versa. People will see it on all fours, and then it stands up and runs off on two. So it obviously has the ability to do both things according to, however it thinks it can get away best at the time. But then there are other sightings where people have had materializations inside their house, or have seen them materializing in a place. I've had several where people have described them as somewhat translucent, kind of like the Predator movies, only they saw it 10 years before the Predator movies came out. So you have this definitely supernatural quality. And then there are some that remind me of the black phantom hound sightings of England, where it's a huge black creature with red glowing eyes. And most of the cases, the eyes are described as having yellow or green eye shine, which is totally normal and natural for wolves or other canines. And by the way, rules out a human in a suit, because humans don't have eye shine. But most of the time, when it's red, it either seems to be one of those somewhat supernatural overtones, or it turns out to be a Bigfoot, which sometimes when I get a good description, I will decide that it was a Bigfoot sighting instead of a canine.
That brings up a point as far as a human in a suit. Have you ever had reports of sort of what their knees and their legs were like? Is it more like a human's leg, or more like the hind legs of a wolf or a dog?
Well, almost every person who gets a really good look at the legs, and not everybody does, because sometimes the legs will be obscured by brush, or they'll be standing in the ditch. But whenever they see the canine head, what I get almost without exception is that they'll say it walked on dog legs, and what they'll say, the key to this is they'll say, it walked really naturally, except it looked like its leg was bent backwards. And actually what they mean is dogs walk on their toe pads, and what would be analogous to the human heel is lifted way up off the ground, kind of where we're expecting to see a knee. And so where we're thinking the leg should be bending forward, like it should be a knee, it's bending backwards because it's the heel and ankle joint. So, and that's something most people would never think about or think through. It just, when they see it walking along upright, they think that, its leg is bent backwards. Whereas when I do get Bigfoot reports, and I get quite a few, surprisingly, they will say, it walked flat-footed. It was like a human, or it reminded me of a gorilla, the way its legs were bent at the knee and the flat foot. And so it's a really big difference between the two of them, their feet. Also, the head descriptions are completely different. The Bigfoot is described as having that sort of crest on top. The ears are not usually observed, if ever. I've never had anybody report seeing the ears. They say it's covered by fur. And then most of them will describe sort of a cape of fur that falls to the shoulders, so the neck is obscured. And the face is much more human-like. There's no big snout. There's, the kind of wide, flat nose, and usually the eyes are sort of dark and sunken, because primates, great apes, don't have that eye shine, and it's just a different thing. Sometimes they'll be glowing red if it's the Bigfoot, and you can get that from shining light into a human's eyes too, because the capillaries, the red blood capillaries will sometimes show their color. So it's kind of interesting that while I certainly don't rule out that either one of these could be some kind of supernatural creature, we do have these physical characteristics that kind of check out according to the species.
I have to ask, since this being a paranormal show and all, do you notice any other sort of phenomena or any other sort of anomalous stuff in the area? For instance, UFO sightings, cattle mutilation,
right.
So on and so on.
Right. Yeah, that does happen. And one thing that I really try to do, I can't possibly get physically to every sighting across the country. I just don't have funds to travel to California or drop everything and run up to New Hampshire or wherever the latest sighting is. But I do go to those that I'm able to. And if I can't, I get myself a good atlas and I do Google Earth and I try to discover what the terrain is, what kind of geographical area it is, what the plants are, and then also what human cultural artifacts are. And what I've discovered is that the great majority of sightings are near some kind of water. And sometimes, very often, a special kind of water, such as the convergence of two rivers. It will be an elevated site very often. Sometimes I've found that there are deposits of quartzite rock or other types of possibly electrical current-bearing rock that's there. But then, very interestingly, I'm finding more and more that there often is a cemetery nearby, a crossroads, a churchyard, and these kinds of things are what are associated with black phantom dog sightings in England and some other European countries. And those black phantom dog sightings are almost entirely supernatural. So, it's really hard to say what's going on. And then there are the Native American connections, too, that are quite bizarre.
Miss Godfrey, this is Sean, and I'm so honored to have you on our show. We've had some, we pretty much investigate and research any and everything that comes to us, and we've had some reports that's come to us, and I want to share with you in a bit, but I wanted to get your opinion. I've kind of got a theory on a lot of these things, and, you mentioned about the crossroads. That's very prominent in our southern culture with the hellhounds, and when it ties into the voodoo and the hoodoo and these different dimensional creatures. And
right.
And my theory and kind of what I've found in researching is I'm wondering if these things are dimensional, and I actually believe that these things are dimensional, and they enter and leave out of one point. And I was wondering if they could be tied to a lot of the Native American places. I know in our area we have the Holy Grounds that was in Lowndes County and Dallas County, where the Creek Indians used it as their holy land. A lot of natural springs, and it was just a pretty much a powerful place for the Native Americans. And if there's somewhere in that area, it's a point that these things can be seen, because in the reports we've had, there's been also sightings of Bigfoot and large panthers as well. So it's been numerous different type of sightings, and I wanted to kind of get your opinion if you think these things could actually be dimensional and could be tied into the Native American things.
Oh, I think that's a definite possibility, and I really hit this theory hard in my second book, Hunting the American Werewolf. That was the book that the very first episode of Monster Quest was based on, but they didn't get so much into the Native American stuff. And one thing I discovered was that, I don't know if you're familiar, but in Wisconsin, we have probably I think the figure's like 96 or 97% of all the animal-shaped ancient effigy mounds in the world. There's a few that protrude into neighboring states, and then there's the Great Ohio Serpent Mound. But almost all the rest are in Wisconsin. And Wisconsin is not the only location of these creatures, but it does sort of seem to be werewolf central. We seem to have the highest concentration. And I noticed that I was looking at a map of where these effigy mounds were located. They're mostly in the southern half of the state. And wherever I saw a certain type called water spirit or water panther, I realized those were the same locations where I had sightings hotspots of the werewolf-like creature. And it was so, I made maps of each and overlaid the transparencies, and they were just spot on. It was just heart-stopping. And that was enough to get me an interview with a Ho-Chunk elder who was also an anthropologist. And she told me that they believe that this creature and Bigfoot are what they call spirit creatures. You might call them multi-dimensional creatures, and that they live in what, according to the Ho-Chunk culture, is called the spirit world, and that they can come and go through certain portals or windows or spirit doors, they would call them. And when they're here, they're fully animal, they're corporeal, they need to eat flesh for sustenance and energy to stay here, and that's why both types are very often observed holding or carrying or running with chunks of deer or roadkill or whatever. But then when they need to, they can go back to the spirit world. And that, furthermore, both types have some sort of ancient business with humans that sort of prevents them from eating us, although they'd like to. And this explains why I have well over 100 sightings. I don't know exactly how many because they vary in quality, but I stopped counting at 100. And the common denominator in all of these is that even when people are caught out in the open with nothing between it and them, and it's chasing them, and it's 7 feet tall, and it's extremely powerful, nobody ever gets killed or hurt, or at least that live to tell about it. I've had people get a mild scratch, just 1 or 2 out of all of those, and the rest they'll say just at the point where they're certain it's going to eat them and it wants to eat them, it just runs off into the brush and disappears. So I think really this theory fits the whole paradigm and all the facts of all the sightings the best. It explains how they're able to get away and how large predators such as this and the Bigfoot can coexist in the same areas, because they do often seem to be at least near each other in the same areas. There's one place in Wisconsin I called the Jefferson Zone of Weirdness, and again, this was in my last book, The Hunting the American Werewolf, where I observed that within a 13 square mile radius, we had lots of man-wolf sightings, Bigfoot sightings, large bird sightings. There are not only ancient mounds that kind of circle it around the outer edges, but one of the there's a huge site with flat-topped ancient pyramids that were left by the mysterious Mississippian people called Aztlan. There's a haunted road. There's a really weird thing that happened, exorcisms, you name it. It's all within this 13 square mile area. A lake monster, several lakes with lake monsters. So you name it, it's all there. And it just seems to be one of these window portal areas. But the idea that they're multidimensional or spirit creatures just really kind of helps resolve all these things. Oh, UFOs too in that area, I might add. And poison murders.
And let me ask you, have you had any of the reports where before anybody actually seen these creatures that they heard something beforehand, maybe something similar like children laughing, or where they kind of had the weird kind of inner vibrational changes, or any type of reports that you've seen repetitive before the people actually saw the creature?
Well, one that comes up now and again is that they'll notice there's a really weird hush, like all the birds stop chirping, all the insects stop humming. There's like dead silence. And some people have noticed that they heard something bipedal that seemed to be stalking them, something heavy going boom, 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 like a 2-footed thing would do. And a couple of people have first heard growling. I haven't ever had anybody associate it with howling, strangely, but I've had a number of people, and when they describe the growling to me, or I ask them to try and reproduce the sound, it comes out as sort of like if you've ever heard a cappuccino maker, where it kind of goes rawr, rawr. It's like a high pitched and a low pitched, and a high pitch and a low pitch. And it sort of grows in intensity, and they all say they've never heard anything like it, and it just freezes their hair upright all over their whole bodies. It's that terrifying. Those are the main things. One weird thing that happens, and people will tell me their experience, and they'll get to the end and they'll say, well, there's one more thing. You're going to think I'm crazy, but I've said so much already. And I always say, I'm not going to think you're crazy because anything you tell me, I'm sure I've heard already from somebody. But they'll say, well, I felt that it was sending me a mental message, not like telepathy, like words, but some kind of mental message. And they interpret it in a number of different ways, such as you're there, I'm here, you can't get me, or don't you tell anybody, or I'd really like to eat you. A lot of people will say they feel that the creature's thinking they're lunch. Some people will say it communicates that it's angry, that it was seen by them. And then there was one woman, a young married mother who was on her way to work as a medical transcriptionist when this thing popped out of the ditch. And she said she felt so strongly that it was communicating to her that if she told anyone, it would follow her and get her, that she was too afraid to even tell her husband for 3 days. And when she did tell the story to me in person, she just started shaking again all over. It just unnerved her so much to think of that. And that being repeated. And I've also had people tell me that same thing from Bigfoot, and I've heard that other places about Bigfoot, but the Bigfoot messages are usually not so angry, violent. The Bigfoot messages are more benign, like, you stay there, be calm, I'm not going to hurt you, you're not going to hurt. The Bigfoot seems to be a little calmer. This thing people often feel is very angry.
Have you noticed I guess right before the people actually seen this creature, that they was kind of at a low vibrational state with themselves, where they was kind of relaxed, just pretty much they wasn't really kind of hyped up, they was relaxed, and it was able to kind of tune into it, or it tuned into them. It's almost like it hit a vibrational connection.
No, I've never heard that. Normally, if people, they get the slightest idea that it's there, they're like adrenaline is pumping. If they're in their car, they just jam on the accelerator as hard and fast as they can without even thinking. All they want to do is get away from it and get out of there. They have indicated a smell. Those who are out at night or in the daytime, for that matter, in the open air with it, or who happen to have their car windows down, have described a smell that usually it's something like, they'll say, imagine the worst dirty dog smell that you can imagine, dirty wet dog, and then add in some dog urine and maybe something else, and that's about what it smells like. So it has this vile odor. They don't describe it skunky like people often describe Bigfoot, but it does have an odor that people notice and do not like.
Well, the report we actually got was a gentleman. It was in Lowndes County, Alabama. So it's near Montgomery. And I've heard the story you had about that happened near Selma, near the Chitu ramp. And this gentleman, he's in his 60s. They've owned this land forever. He's just a typical Southern old guy, where he pretty much is just there. And pretty much what he did, he went out to the land to check his cows. When he arrived, I'm going off from my mind, so David's sitting there, so if I mess anything up, fill me in. When he arrived, there was 3 cows, about 30 yards apart, hindquarters ripped open, and each cow and the throats ripped out of them. As he got there, he noticed the cows was dead, and he started examining them. He examined the first cow. He was walking to the second cow. He looked up on the hill, and he pretty much just like what you said, where something connected to him, where something told him to look. When he looked up, he saw what appeared to be like a large wolf that actually stood up. He said it walked like a man, but it had a wolf head, and it had a piece of meat or something in its mouth, and pretty much it looked at him and it walked off. And the guy said that he's always heard stories of things about going up missing, but he's never witnessed anything like that. And this is one of the gentlemen that absolutely has, just didn't want anybody to know and just kind of blew him away. And he reported it to the police department, and he came to us with the story. And
if you remember, he actually said that he shot at it and was sure he hit it, but nothing.
Nothing happened, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that before. That seems to be common, and can you get him to report it to me? I'd really like to study this one, because that's very interesting, because it follows another line of inquiry that I've noticed, is that these things are very interested in livestock, and I've had a number of witnesses observe them staring into chicken coops or barn windows, trying to see if there are animals in there. Cats go missing when they're reported in the area. People have seen them tear apart dogs, from little ones to German Shepherds. So they're very actively aggressive toward domesticated animals. Whatever, it's kind of like whatever's an easy meal, they'll go after. And
that's exactly the second one I was going to tell you about. Now, where the Boca Chitu landing is, where your story came out, is that Lowndes County and the Alabama River all runs and connects right through there, and it's wildlife management areas. There's when we researched and started talking to some of the people, there's numerous animals like cats and stuff that's gone missing, goats, but this was reported to us about a year ago. This gentleman did, and we had another report actually about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it happened. This is in Selma, Alabama, near Craig Airfield. So it's probably about 30 miles from that Boca Chitu ramp. And a gentleman lives out in the country. He has 4 dogs, and they're pretty much just the large mutts, basically. The dog started barking, going crazy, and this is out in the country. And he thought the dogs, normally it means that there's some animal out there. The gentleman said he walked outside to look. He could hear his dogs in the background barking, cutting up, and he said he absolutely just felt terrified, like there was something there. He turned around, he went back inside, he shut the door, and the next morning he went outside, and one of his dogs was cowered next to the front door. As he went to look, 2 of his dogs was missing, and the third dog was pretty much. We actually got a picture of that. We could say to you, well, pretty much it's the head skinned. There's no blood trails, and there's no body. It's just the head of the dog that was left.
Wow.
And that's in that area as well.
Well, that sounds very much like this guy in Illinois, whose dog. I'm trying to think if it was a lab or a German Shepherd. It was one of those big dogs. I'm thinking it was a German Shepherd, and it went running into the woods. He heard this noise in the woods, and the dog, after he had seen the creature, he had a sighting of it too. The dog went running into the woods, and he went running after the dog because he was really afraid for it. It was a moonlit night, and he got there in time to see this thing just pick up his dog and virtually tear it in two. And he just went running for home, and the next morning in daylight he went back, and there was nothing left but a few little bits of fur and that kind of thing. And I've had some women come out of their house in Illinois because they heard a commotion on their porch and saw one of these standing there on its hind legs with their cat in its mouth. And they managed to startle it enough to make it drop the cat. But, I've had lots of people report missing cats. So, yeah, I think, there may be some ancient business that keeps them from eating us, but they sure like our animals.
One of the things, we've been doing this a while, and, we pretty much we have a blog on WSFA, and we have them send us stories constantly, whatever is going on, for us to look into it. But for me, have you seen this pretty much pick up, where more and more of these sightings are being seen, and more of the strange happenings are starting to happen? Have you seen it pretty much pick up in the past few years?
I don't know if I would say that I've seen it pick up, but the thing is that the more it becomes known and the more people, see my books, become aware of my website, it seems to sort of correspond to my publicity levels, because when people become more aware, they just naturally then are able to report it. I believe that there are so many that go unreported because they don't know that there's anyone who's collecting the body of reports. Like I've been doing this for 18 years now. And so I've got a pretty wide body of reports. And when people hear that, they're just so glad to be able to tell someone who won't think they're crazy. And I welcome every report. I really hope that I can talk to you guys later and get the data on the last 2 that you mentioned, because what I'm doing is trying to put together sort of a nationwide mapping of it. And in my new book, The Michigan Dogman, Werewolves, and Other Unknown Canines Across the USA, I've got a map in the back where I've started, and I don't think the map is finished yet, but it shows you the broad trends of where the main sightings occur in the United States. And it's pretty interesting because if you look at it, they're thickest around the Great Lakes states. And then they sort of branch off. There's one arm that kind of branches southwest down through Oklahoma and down to Texas. There's another branch then that branches down to the east, down toward Alabama and the southern states, and another one that kind of follows the Great Lakes and heads out to kind of straight over toward New York State. And I've got sightings up in Maine and Montreal. It's kind of crazy, but they're all over. But every time I can get another sighting, it makes my database more accurate. And I really feel that finding if there are migratory routes, or if all of these places have some sort of geographical or Native American feature in common, then we can learn more. But now just those two that you've given me would have been two more nice big circles on my Alabama part of the map. So I'd like to be able to add those, and hopefully we'll put it all together one of these days.
Sure. Have you talked to anybody or know of anybody that's actually gone out in the field and kind of researched it, kind of like taking some time out and investigating, and any theories out there about anybody kind of look and see can they encounter it on their own, like researchers?
Well, I've done that. I mean, when I can't go chasing after everyone, but when there's one that's I have several criteria. If it's recent enough so that there might still be either a creature there or at least some kind of evidence. It has to be fairly recent. It has to be within my capability of getting there. You know, I can't fly here and there, but if it's someplace within driving distance, I'll try and get there. And if the land is accessible, sometimes it's private land that people that don't want anything to do with it, and you just can't go there. But if all of those criteria are met, I've done overnight stakeouts using, we get camouflage and you hang your clothes out so they don't smell like humans, and put bait out. I have different baits that I like to use. Set up motion detector cameras. We have walkie-talkies. It's not the kind of thing where, I know there's a Bigfoot method where they go out in the woods stomping and yelling and hitting trees. We do the opposite, and try to just kind of hunker down in a very quiet and hidden place and just hope that the bait will attract something. And so far I haven't had any luck doing that, but I still feel obligated to do it. And I will go out, and even if I don't do the nighttime stakeout, I will try to get there and investigate. And in fact, that really paid off. In June of 2007, I got a call that some people had been chased by one on this road that is really sort of next to a populated area, but then it runs into farm fields that end up at a cliff over Lake Michigan between Milwaukee and Racine. And I was able to get there within a couple of days. And just before that, there had been some rain, so there was some good soft mud around. And that was where I was able to find some really good footprints, 8 inches long, excuse me. The photograph is in the Michigan Dogman book. And it was really interesting because it was sort of clay-like mud that was not on the road. It wasn't any place anybody could have faked it. It was off a little tractor lane that we just happened to go down as I was exploring it again with the witnesses. And you could see where a deer had been standing there and was surprised, and its hind legs dug in and as it sprang out. And then these other big prints, and also some small dog prints, canine prints, were right next to it. And people will often say, well, when you get a print in mud, it can spread out, and get much bigger than it was supposed to be. However, the dog prints had stayed exactly the same, and the deer prints were exactly the same. So there's no reason that only this one type of print should have spread out. And we were able to get pretty good prints. I was, of course, kicking myself that I did not have my plaster of Paris with me, but I really wasn't expecting to find such good prints in that kind of location. And now I always have it. I have a bucket currently in my car. I take it everywhere I go, just in case. So it's something that I try to do. And people do write and ask me if they can go on expeditions with me, and I'm afraid I always have to say I can't just go on expeditions with people from the internet, no matter how great you are, and I'm sure most of them are terrific. But I do have I call them my posse, a group of people who are trained at doing these things and who have a lot of the electronic equipment that I've known for a number of years. That if I need somebody to go, they're always up for it. So I'm kind of set that way. But I do try to get out there and do field investigations whenever possible, even if it's just interviewing witnesses in person or by phone if necessary.
Yeah, I'm going to share. I've got a weird theory about this. I've done a lot of field interviews with regard to this, and we traveling around, and this and kind of my theory. How I just want to get your honest opinion. You won't hurt my feelings. I really believe that like a lot of these deer cameras, they're everywhere in Alabama, and I feel like while we hadn't captured really anything there because they let off that small vibration. One of my theories is that I already mapped out a lot of the Native American villages that was there, but I guess the ones I've got mapped out that was there before the Creek and Indian War, and kind of have that in mind. And I travel around and speak a lot, and what I want to do is carry the map of Montgomery County and Lowndes County and Dallas County, how it all connects. And I want to go to see a lot of the psychics and ask them, can you pinpoint me when I go to these conventions? Can you tell me what spot you think there's a portal? And when one gives me a mark, I'll mark it down. And I'll ask all the different psychics and different people that I know and just give me your opinion. And then once I get the maps, I'd see how many of them picked the same spot. Then I would connect it to the Native American spot. And what's cool about this area here in Alabama is a lot of it's wildlife management land and accessible by the river. And what I would like to go I've done the Bigfoot way, but the way I would like to go this time out for this creature is actually do it in a way where you pretty much you carry your drum. You pretty much just bang a Native American drum. I've heard a lot of the reports and some of the things regards to the panther that's been seen and a lot of the Bigfoot. And here in Alabama, a lot of people has heard like almost similar to children laughing, but it's not children. And it falls into place with the Native American and especially the Creeks legend regards to the little people. And if there's dimensional, and kind of play that out in the air and pretty much search that way and go by the river and pretty much not have any of the cameras, any of the equipment, just pretty much go on our own and seeking we encounter it that way and pretty much a vibrational look. And the key to it, I would think, with trying to find the portal, the point of these creatures coming in and out of the dimension. And if you have the 3-county area and can get a good idea of what people think and if you can connect it, that would be a direction to go to see what you can find. How far-fetched of a kind of theory or plan do you think that is?
Well, here's my only concern is that when you're out in these woods, I always tell people this too. If you're just kind of walking through the woods in the dark with camo on, you sort of have to be prepared that there are also things like feral hogs, cougars, or the southern version, catamounts, whatever you want to call them. We have bears and wolves up here. And I always like to remind people to really remember the known creatures that are around, because a lot of times when I've been out in that kind of situation, one of the people with me is armed, because you want to put your safety first, and you just don't know what else you might encounter. But I think it's an interesting thing, and have you noticed that the psychics are very accurate at that? I think it's great that you're keeping track and sort of putting this out as an experiment and keeping data on it. I think that's pretty cool. Some are, and I just like to see their points and what they think, and some of the ones that's actually pinpointed, some of the ones near, let's say, the Holy Ground that's in Lowndes County, right, connected near the Alabama River. Those are that's kind of the main point that I feel. And you're right about being there at night. In my mind, I thought the key to really being out is moving would be early in the morning or late in the afternoon, and the rest is stay in a campsite and just stay in one area and sit and wait. That would be the way to do it, unless you move in the morning or right late in that afternoon, but the rest sit there. And there's so many psychics out there and people that's in this field that I come across. We might as well use them and see if you can connect it to this field. And I'm a firm believer in the vibrational state and the dimensions and all that. And I think that's a good way to try to find these portals, the dimensions, the doorways for these things coming in and out of. Well, there's something else you might try. In Hunting the American Werewolf, that's probably my biggest book of theory, and I just kind of went with everything I could find from everyone, from a remote viewer who used to be with the U.S. government to I actually found a pet psychic who seemed to have some really pretty amazing hits just from people that I knew, and I asked her to look at my forensics sketch that I've made of what most witnesses describe seeing, and just kind of meditate on it. And she felt that she made contact with sort of a head being of the species that was, and she felt that she was in an underground cavern being led through caves, and what she was told was that they were much older than us, they had been here before we were, and that they would be here after us. But she had the distinct impression, and it wouldn't tell her anymore, it said that's all you need to know, but she had the distinct impression that she was underground in caverns and caves. And so if you've got caves, cave entrances were also sometimes considered entrances to the underworld by Native Americans, and as were springs, freshwater springs. So if you're trying to go with sort of the Native American view, I would look kind of at maybe cave mouths and freshwater springs for your portals, because that seemed to be what they believed. But it's also interesting. I've been documenting Bigfoot sightings, and I do get them from around the state, but I list these in my latest book, The Michigan Dog Man. I noticed that they seemed to be clustering. In other words, sort of following one certain area that was next to, but not necessarily in the same territory as where I had lots of the what I call man-wolf sightings. And from the 60s till now, I've counted about 12 Bigfoot sightings, pretty credible sightings, that are all contained within just a small 3-county area, and it's not all parts of the 3 counties, just kind of where they join. And the last 2 that I had, I plotted them on a map, and then I went and got the very old map of surveyed ancient effigy sites, many of which have been bulldozed or no longer stand. And I found that both of those sightings were almost exactly on the same spots where the Indian mounds were. And nobody could have known that. Certainly the people who reported them to me didn't know that. So, it's finding these kind of patterns that excite me in the research.
Yes, ma'am. And before we have to wrap up here and around the top of the hour, I wanted to get a question in that a person in the chat room asked to ask you. And forgive me, but I don't know the movie he's referencing, never seen it. But he's wanting to know if it's something like the creature from the Legend of Boggy Creek. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, that's a pretty well-known thing. I'm not sure that creature was exactly canine, and that it was exactly the same thing. There's also a video out about Land Between the Lakes, and that one is it is canine, but it seems a lot different in nature and behavior than any of the reports, that I usually get. So I'm not sure, again, if it's the same thing. There's also a movie out there called The Beast of Bray Road, where a production company took the title of my book and kind of made up a grade B slasher movie from it. I had nothing to do with it. My name's not in any of the credits, and I do not receive any money from it. I just like people to know that right offhand. If people are interested in seeing all my books, they can go to, I have a site called beastofbrayroad.com, B-R-A-Y road.com, and you can go to, I have a page called Media, which has my bio and a list of all my books. You can also go to the books page and see more about the books, see where to order them, that kind of thing. And there is also a frequently asked question page where you can get quick answers to a lot of the things people ask me most often. And many times people will email me asking me these things when they could just go to the website and get a lot more information. I don't post a lot on that site anymore. You'll find links to my Twitter and MySpace blogs where I really do the updates, just because that website is kind of hard to manage. But I do keep radio and speaking schedules on there, and you'll also find you can search back in my older blogs and find lots of examples and reports and sightings and comments from me on things. So there's still a lot there to explore, and I do update the schedule and the books page and other things. So again, that's beastofbrayroad.com. I do a lot of twittering, so if anybody's on Twitter, please follow me again. And that would be Linda S. Godfrey on Twitter.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very, very much for donating your time with us here tonight, and we really appreciate you stopping by.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. You have a great night. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yes, ma'am. Well, that was Linda Godfrey. Like she said, you can check out her website at www.beastofbrayroad, B-R-A-Y. And Sean, David, you guys still up and awake?
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was a great guest and very fitting. A lot of the things we've talked to and a lot of the things that we've kind of worked on. You know, we've done a lot of the research and investigations in the field with Bigfoot and even with this some. So we'll continue to do that and get in contact with her and see what we can find. I just want to thank everybody for listening to the show. Check us out. What?
We have like 5 minutes left.
Oh, Jake, why are you wrapping me up, man?
I wasn't wrapping. I was asking you about the guest.
Oh, wow. My bad.
I'll go.
Well, I thought
I'll make the wrap-up sign.
I thought it was. I thought the guest was very good. I thought it was. It was interesting to see the reports, and there's some similarity regards to the river, and so on. And you know, the cool thing about our guest tonight, it really makes us feel like that we're kind of on the right road of what we're doing and some of the work that we're looking into. And so it was interesting. So we'll see what happens. I know we've got a lot of cool guests coming up in the near future. I know Michelle's done a really good job. So we'll see.
Did Mike fall asleep at all, Hump? I didn't see him.
I wasn't paying attention, but I do want to invite everybody that's going to be in the Tri-County area to come to the book signing Saturday night, the Book Emporium on Mulberry Street, Montgomery, Alabama. I think everybody's going to be there. It starts at 7 o'clock. Sean will be doing a lecture, and then we'll be doing the book signing. So if you want to get a book, come get your book autographed. Please come out. Montgomery, Alabama, Mulberry Street, Midtown, Montgomery. 7 o'clock Saturday.
Yeah, you know, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of nervous about it. I'm always nervous about things in Montgomery. Cause that's kind of, you know, that's
it's
home.
hit or miss, Sean.
Hey, it's home.
Been doing it since we were 10 and nobody knows us.
Hey, you know what? I appreciate the opportunity. It's going to be fun. You know, we've got a busy few months coming up. You know, February 18th to 20th, we got Conecuh and Chattanooga, Tennessee. March 19th, we investigate in Sloss and Furnace in Birmingham, Alabama. May 20th through 22nd, we got a MagicCon in Birmingham. And June 3rd through 5th, we're in Conn, Carolina and Charlotte, North Carolina. So we got a lot of things coming up. I'm really excited about it. So we'll see what happens. I want to invite everybody to check out our websites at southernparanormalresearchers.org. Rick's been doing a lot of work updating our website for southernparanormalresearchers.org. I appreciate him doing that. Also, check out my website, SeanSellos.com. Sign my guest book. I know Jake changed it, and I've only got 6 signatures on my guest book now. So come help me out. Come sign my guest book at SeanSellos.com.
I'll change it back.
No, it's good. That's not that I have nobody signed my guest book then.
Like anyone did before.
Hey, I had some before.
You had 7.
No, I had more than 7.
You had like 10 or 11 maybe.
It don't matter. It don't matter. Come by and sign my guest book. or check out JakeBellGrumpy.com.
Can we write irrational thoughts on there?
Yeah. Yeah, if you want
Yours would be like a book.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. Also, check out chroniclesofthesupernaturalist.com. It's a website with our book. Let us know what you think about the book. We've got more projects we're working on in the near future, so it should be man, it's fun doing what we're doing. We're really blessed. We've got a great team behind us. We've got some investigations coming up, some opportunities we're working on in the near future, and man, I like the direction we're going. I'm really excited about everything. We couldn't do it without everybody listening to our show, supporting us, believing in what we're doing, and we're definitely, we're not perfect. We'll make some mistakes. We're always going to be honest. We'll always speak from the heart. We'll do the best we can out there, and we truly, truly appreciate everybody out there that takes the time to listen to our show, follows us, and believes in us and appreciates it. I really do appreciate it so much. It's a labor of love, and it definitely takes a lot of time. But if it's your calling, you can do it and not think twice about it. And this really is. And we have a good time on the radio show, and I hope you enjoy it as much as we enjoy doing the show. So I guess we're kind of winding down, and we'll go ahead and kind of wrap it up as always with John Wesley's rule: do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, and all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as you ever can. Guys, I'm Sean Sellers with Jake Bell, David Humphrey, Michael Gerback, our producer, Marcel Sellers. I want to thank everybody out there listening to our show, all of our friends, supporters out there, Rick, Mark, everybody out there, guys. We appreciate y'all so much. And check out our website once again, SeanSellers.com and SouthernParanormalResearchers.org. Good night, guys.